This video is one part of a 6-part Main Street Basics, Main Street, Iowa orientation video series. Other videos in this in-depth... All right, take 4. See, now I have Kelly in my head. This video is one part of a 6-part Main Street Basics, Main Street, Iowa orientation video series. Other videos in this series include in-depth discussions on each of the Main Street 4 points, a general presentation covering the Main Street approach, as well as a discussion of the foundations of Main Street program management. Today's session will go into more detail about the design point of the Main Street approach. Design is one of 4 integrated values that help create the framework for this comprehensive approach to Main Street District revitalization that is tied together by overarching market-based economic strategies called transformation strategies. As you participate in this training, we challenge you to think about how each of the 4 points overlap and support each other through this process, not as individual silos or isolated committees, but as a coordinated and powerful strategy for your local Main Street program. This design training will be facilitated by one of Main Street Iowa's design specialists, Sarah Lemke. Sarah is one member of our Main Street Iowa team, a team that is here to support your local Main Street program with technical support, assistance, and connection to the broader Main Street network here in Iowa and across the country. Sarah, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you for joining us for this overview of Main Street design. In this presentation, I'll talk a bit about the importance of design in general, go over 4 main activity areas under the design point, and then introduce you to the design services that are available to our designated Main Street communities. When we talk about design as one of the 4 points of the Main Street approach, we're really talking about the physical value of our downtowns and commercial districts. The design point focuses on improving the appearance of the commercial district through historic preservation-based sustainable strategies. This focus is key to the Main Street approach and is what really sets it apart from other economic development strategies. When most people think about the design point, they probably think about buildings, but it also includes everything from streetscapes to window displays, design education, and everything in between. So why does design matter to your downtown revitalization efforts? I included 2 streetscape pictures here, and I encourage you to just take a second to look at the 2 of these and ask yourself some questions. Which one looks like a place you would want to visit? Which one looks like a place you'd want to spend a day shopping, wandering the sidewalks, spending time with family, spending money? Which one looks like a place you would want to open a business or invest in? Design isn't just about the individual pieces of the puzzle, like doing building rehabilitation projects or comprehensive streetscape projects. It's about putting all these different elements together to create an environment that people are drawn to. One that feels safe, one that's welcoming, one that displays some community pride, a place people can come together and enjoy themselves, and ultimately, a place that people want to spend their time and money. But it's important to remember that getting to that second picture doesn't just happen overnight. I encourage you to start thinking about Main Street design as an incremental process. It's a great idea to start small and then have projects snowball into larger ones. Also remember that it takes time and creativity for these major building projects. And projects that are high impact don't always require high dollar investment. This picture is from Clarence, and it's a great example of these concepts. It's one of their biggest buildings downtown and needed a lot of work to get to a fully rehabbed building. But instead of getting bogged down by the final product, they started small by doing some initial exterior stucco repairs and putting on a fresh coat of paint. This work invigorated the public and helped people see the potential in the building. Now, when we think about design activities, there are 4 primary areas of focus. I'll talk about education and awareness first because this is often overlooked, but it's crucial to the success of your design committee and getting people engaged in downtown design. We have to teach people about downtown historic buildings and why their unique character is important in order for them to really be able to understand and care about our downtown buildings and the local revitalization efforts. There are many different approaches to think about in terms of education and awareness. It will depend on what works in your community and what gets people engaged and interested in design. It might be hands-on workshops where people can get their hands dirty. It might be newsletter articles or partnering with the local paper, local award recognitions, or even Thursday posts on social media. It doesn't need to be overly complicated or overly expensive in order to be effective. And while some of these tools might require some initial investment to create, they could be something with a long shelf life that can be used for years. Some good examples are a self-guided walking tour created by Marshalltown and the historic plaques that Colfax installed on buildings downtown. In Woodbine, they continuously build on and activate the initial work they did to create their downtown walking tour brochures by partnering with local school classes to lead walking tour groups. These projects help tell the story of these individual communities and help identify significant buildings downtown. Another way to get people engaged is by hosting tours of the downtown buildings themselves. Czech Village New Bohemia in Cedar Rapids partnered with local breweries and restaurants to show off both residential and commercial spaces in downtown. The photo on the right was from Ottumwa's upper story housing tour, which shows finished buildings as well as some vacant spaces and properties for sale to provide a behind the scenes look at places that the public may not have ever known about otherwise. These tours can even serve as a fundraiser for your organization if you sell tickets or merchandise at the event. I encourage you to think about how to engage people of all ages in educational activities in downtown. Having kids involved in your Main Street district will also get parents, grandparents, other family members, and friends involved too. Coloring contests and scavenger hunts are great ways to do this. The Coon Rapids scavenger hunt helped people to appreciate the unique architectural character that many may take for granted just because they pass by it every day. And now onto the area that most people think of when they're thinking about Main Street design activities, the building improvements. Typically, communities want to jump in and tackle the large, underutilized, and sometimes problem buildings. But we really want to encourage you to also think holistically and build your understanding of what you have first. A great way to start is by completing building inventory forms. This activity can be done with your design committee in partnership with the Economic Vitality Committee, because you'll want to gather data on things like building ownership and occupancy, what spaces you have available for new businesses coming into town or new residents. You'll want to know whether spaces are move-in ready so that you can point people in the right direction if they're looking to move downtown. It's also important to look at historic information like the date of construction for your buildings and if they are listed or eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. Knowing this data is key because it could potentially open owners up to other funding opportunities as well. Photo inventories are also an important part of the inventory process. This involves both collecting historic photographs as well as taking current photographs so that you can get a sense of how the streetscape has changed over time. And these can be used to guide planned building improvement projects or even inspire facade projects. I recommend creating and maintaining a digital file folder for every downtown building with photographs and building information using something like Google Drive or Dropbox. This will allow you to share the inventories with others. Having really great photographs and a collection of information on your buildings will also help you to tell the story of the transformation of your downtown. It's also great to utilize these photos for marketing and fundraising efforts when building projects are completed. And I'd like to take a moment here to just familiarize you with an important resource that we have for you. The Downtown Design Guide was created by the MSI design team to help local Main Street programs, city staff, downtown development groups, property owners, and volunteers as they embark on the revitalization and continued maintenance of their downtowns. It includes guiding principles, a deeper dive into topics such as developing historic significance, and sections on public space and existing buildings. A section on managing change also provides valuable information on how to deal with development pressures and new construction within your district. And then finally, the appendices have some quick guides such as a glossary of important terms and contacts for other resources to be aware of as you work on your design projects. You can access this through the Iowa Downtown Resource Center website on the Downtown Resources and Networking page. It's also linked in the MSI FYI that goes out to you weekly. In addition to familiarizing yourself with the Downtown Design Guide, I encourage you to take a look at some architectural terms. I don't expect you to be experts in architecture and design, but I do want you to be comfortable enough to discuss buildings on site with owners. You need to know enough so the design committee can be local advocates for good downtown building rehab and preservation projects. Most buildings share the common elements that are shown here. There are large display windows at the storefront level, and above that, you have transom windows that were historically designed to allow more natural light to carry into the deep and narrow buildings. The main entrance door was also typically recessed, which provides a transition between the sidewalk and the store, provides the door with some rain cover, and makes the main entrance stand out. The upper facades have large operable windows to allow airflow into the building. And then there is usually a cornice at the top, which is a visual cap for the entire building. So as you look at your downtown buildings, just start to recognize what historic features still exist and what might have been lost over time. It's also really important to understand that architectural features and building styles may vary throughout your district. People tend to have a very narrow vision of what a historic building looks like and tend to gravitate the more traditional styles from around the late 19th and early 20th century. But it's important to recognize that there are also some modern styles in many downtowns that have their own unique characteristics and materials. And these can be just as important as the more traditional buildings in telling the story of how our downtowns have evolved. So now I want to show a couple of examples of exterior building projects. This is a small one-story building in downtown Woodbine. You can see some original features still exist, like the cornice at the top and a brick pier down the middle. You can also see that some storefront windows were reduced in size and infilled with siding. When the inappropriate infill was removed, the original storefront columns were revealed and new large storefront display windows were installed. This completely changes the appearance of the building and makes it a much more functional and desirable space for the interior tenant. It also improves the way the interior of the building interacts with the street itself and makes it much more inviting. This next example is an older project from Dubuque, but it's a great example of how sometimes buildings are altered so much that it's hard to tell if it's even historic. The building looks like it might have been built in the 70s with that shingle shake awning and some faux masonry. But when they started digging around with some of the building inventory tools that we discussed, looking at historical photographs, they were able to see what it actually looked like. They ended up pulling off different pieces of the facade to see what existed and uncovered the locations of original windows with sills and headers. This is an after photo of the building, and as you can see, it is a huge transformation that would not have been possible without the knowledge from the historic data and what they could see on site. And then these are two pictures that I included to highlight an important point that not every building will have standout historic character defining features. When we talk about downtown design and preservation, we sometimes refer to these buildings as lowercase p preservation, as opposed to the buildings with a lot of historic details, which we call the capital P preservation projects. It's worth noting that smaller and more utilitarian buildings can be just as important in contributing to the downtown aesthetic. These usually provide a lot of opportunities because there's often more leeway to have fun with things like paint, awnings, signage, and even greenery surrounding the buildings. It's all these little elements that come together to provide more character to these buildings. So whether we're talking about capital P or lowercase p preservation, we really want to look at our Main Street leaders as local advocates for good design. We encourage you to assist with things such as simple hands-on projects like painting and pulling out infill materials, and even things like pulling debris out of upper stories to ready it for a contractor. By having a good understanding of design, you can help building owners locate contractors and suppliers and craftsmen that are experienced in working with historic buildings. Since these projects can be a little different than new construction, your design committee can use their knowledge from other projects and be there to help. They can also help be proactive in identifying building projects and assist with applications for funding and development proposals to make these building projects a reality. So although building improvements are a big portion of design committee efforts, the other part of design activities is public improvements. Although the city or public works department typically lead many larger initiatives like streetscape projects, Main Street can and should play an important role in projects by engaging the community and advocating for improvements that will benefit the downtown district. But first, we encourage the Main Street Design Committee to start small with the maintenance of what you already have, with things like community cleanups. A great time to get volunteers out to clean is the end of a winter season or times when there's a lot of road debris or trash from street events. You can make it fun by adding a competitive edge to it with prizes for the best themes outfits, decorated equipment, or maybe even give a prize to a group that gets the most done. Design committees can also pick and install seasonal decorations to add some color and some vibrancy to downtown, add flowers and plants, and small-scale street amenities. Consider incorporating public art or historical images to reinforce your community's unique assets. If you have already implemented some smaller projects, it's time to start thinking bigger with amenities and placemaking strategies. Consider what void you have in your downtown. What do people need in order to linger longer and spend more time there, and ultimately spend more money downtown? What kind of unique spaces and elements could enhance the function and aesthetic of your district, whether that is large-scale banner projects or alley activation projects? Placemaking projects can be especially effective when they tie into your local identity. Think about what stories your community wants to tell. A great example of this is the Frank Lloyd Wright mural for Mason City that really ties into the architectural heritage of their community. Another example is Canteen Alley in Ottumwa that ties into a very well-known canteen restaurant that's been a long-standing institution there. Even just dressing up simple utility boxes with historic downtown photographs like Newton did. All of these projects really add to the environment on the street and help people have memorable experiences in your downtown. Another positive impact that a design committee could have is vacant property activation. Although these are on buildings, I consider it a public service to activate an empty storefront to draw positive attention to an impending store building, like the photo on the left, or even a display to get people thinking about potential uses for a vacant building, such as the photo to the right. If you can't access the interior of the building, vinyl window decals, window paint, or other things can be used on the outside of the building to activate the storefront too. Think about simple ways to improve the appearance while also making the window work in your favor. You could advertise local community events, spread positive messaging, or really just add some color and vibrancy to the streetscape. And the last category of design activities that I want to talk about is the protection and management of your assets, or guiding your Main Street's development. This means being proactive as you look towards future investment, growth, and change in downtown. As I mentioned earlier, preservation is at the heart of the Main Street approach. So what exactly is preservation? A lot of people think that in order to preserve a building, it must be formally listed in the National Register of Historic Places, when in fact, preservation is really much broader and more encompassing. Anything that is important to your community is worth preserving. This quote from the National Trust does a great job of summarizing the different things that tie into why we preserve. Some things are worth saving because they're good to look at, they're a gift to the street, and enriches their surroundings. And then some other buildings are worth saving because there's plenty of life left in them, and they can be adapted for other uses. And then some buildings are worth saving because they're linked to our past and help us understand who we are. This ties into the uniqueness of each community in Iowa and is what sets it apart from others. Countless studies also consistently prove the benefits of historic preservation through things like improved property values and how it fosters small local businesses. I encourage you to think about ways to capitalize on the value of historic preservation and prioritize it within your districts. Alongside preservation is how we plan and manage change in our downtowns. As a leader in your local Main Street program, know what protections exist if there's a threat on a historic property being torn down. And when new construction is proposed, know what is in place to ensure that the design and materials of that new building are compatible with your historic commercial district. Similarly, Be aware of what your local zoning code says to ensure that downtown-friendly development tools are in place. For example, many old codes prohibit things like projecting signage and outdoor dining. If this is the case, they might need to be updated so that the uses that we want to encourage to make a downtown an active and lively place are allowed. Another critical part of planning and management is creating incentives for building projects and marketing those opportunities. I recommend doing this in partnership with the Economic Vitality Committee because it's about promoting and incentivizing the type of ideal development that you want to see and what building owners really need in your community. This approach is the carrot rather than the stick approach to getting things done. While you are undergoing preservation planning and initiatives, it's helpful to know who's in your corner. Make sure you're aware of your local partners in preservation and consider how they can help you reach your goals. Many times, cities and counties have their own initiatives, as well as other economic development groups in your area. There are also likely other groups that have similar goals to you, like your local historical society or historic preservation commission. There are also art groups that might be interested in partnering in streetscape improvements, and people that might be involved and have a stake in your building rehab projects, like your design professionals, construction trades, your bankers, and your real estate agents. All of these groups listed could be valuable resources to you. Also be aware of state and national resources that can provide assistance, whether that is financially, like grants that are available through the Iowa Economic Development Authority and other agencies, or technical guidance and advocacy information through the National Trust, Main Street America, and Preservation Iowa. When in doubt, feel free to reach out to Main Street Iowa design staff. MSI design services are free to all our designated communities. Design services fall into several areas, the first being trainings and workshops. Trainings can be more general in nature or on specific needs in your community, like signage, window displays, or other building rehab subjects. We also have a lot of design resources and handouts we can provide for guidance on various design elements. Another great opportunity is the Challenge Grant, which is available exclusively to Main Street Iowa communities for brick and mortar rehabilitation projects. The application is typically released July 1st, and applications are due in early September. And last but not least is the Main Street Iowa Design Assistance. This is the primary technical service we provide, which involves individual consultations with building and business owners in your districts to support building rehabilitation projects. We do this either through an on-site or a virtual meeting, depending on the project. The visit type will depend on your needs and the timing of the project, and requests can be initiated via an online form, and the link is included every week in the FYI MSI email. Some examples of types of projects we could work on are exterior improvements such as facade upgrades, storefronts, signage, paint colors, and conceptual plans for upper story housing. After our meeting, depending on what is needed, we'll produce a package that looks like what you see here. You'll get a concept drawing showing some proposed improvements to the property. There'll be some notes to help explain the changes that are shown and some general written guidance. And we might also include paint colors, a suggested awning fabric, some handouts, and other technical information that we might think might be helpful. This service is intended to provide building owners with some initial guidance and education on appropriate treatment for their historic buildings. Oftentimes, we're working with people that are doing it themselves, so they might just need some direction on materials. The service can also be helpful to provide a visual to people working with contractors or other people on their building project team to get them all on the same page. Other times, it's used to help get the ball rolling on a larger project and help people to think about the possibilities. It can also help with grant applications to visually communicate and substantiate your plans for the project. But it is important to understand that Main Street Iowa Design Service is not full-scale construction documents or a substitute for other design professionals. Depending on the project type, size, and approvals you need, you might still need to hire private design professionals. For example, you may need an architect and structural engineer in order to make substantial building improvements, or if you are applying for historic preservation tax credits and other incentives. Even for those larger projects, design assistance can be utilized to get some of those first ideas down on paper and point you in the right direction. And if you are ever unsure where to go with a design project, issue, or design committee activity, feel free to contact the Main Street Iowa design staff. My contact is listed here. And again, we are happy to help and can't wait to work with you in improving your Main Street district.